Howdy, folks. We're looking at Edge Magazine number 2, November 1993. Indeed, the future of video gaming. Make sure you first see my description of the first Edge, October 1993. And this time we'll be talking about CD-ROM and the Silicon Dream, which is a reference to Silicon Graphics, not the silicon we have in chips, but the graphics station, which was all the buzz in the early 90s. So let's zoom into the bottom left. Do you recognize the game on the cover? I didn't, but it's Chaos Control, which you've probably forgotten in the meanwhile. What did it say here? So, Chaos Control from Infogrames, that's the French company. A CD-ROM game using mind-blowing 3D images rendered on Silicon Graphics workstations. The bizarre history of CD-ROM and how it relates to games starts on page 48. See for yourself. So, what do these two things have to do with each other? Not that much if you ask me. It says at the bottom left, Silicon Graphics are creating the best visuals in the business, but can CD-ROM keep up with the pace? I don't get that question. You know, if anything, 3D graphics are better for the data storage of CD-ROM because you don't have to constantly get information from the cartridge in order to get new images. The computer creates the images themselves. But I think it has to do with how this game, Chaos Control, was kind of like Time Cop. It was an on-rails shooter, and everything was pre-rendered, so it kind of looked like Donkey Kong Country. So maybe there were just too many images to fit on a CD? Well, let's open up and find out. So, we have a black page, and oh yeah, the CD. Games are going to be being played on the CD. And the Mega CD has been a bit of a flop so far. And the Turbo Duo, or the the PC Engine CD didn't really mean that much either, so people were skeptical. And it wouldn't be until the PlayStation 1 that CD games became the norm. So, yeah, we have the Jaguar too. And I don't recognize the other games. Oh, a CDI. This must be promising. So, apparently the Jaguar springs upon the unsuspecting world. And we know that's history. It was too complicated to program on. It did have quite a lot of power, but you had to use the multiple CPUs. And only the likes of John Carmack can actually do that. So we see some games at the bottom. They look like, Super Nintendo games. You have, I think it's a Mickey Mouse game. Excuse me. And Raiden. And, yes. More Raiden. Oh, you have Looney Tunes. Looks kind of the same as the Genesis and Super Nintendo games, right? This one looks kind of 3D. Anyhow, yeah, the Jaguar, not that impressive in practice. If it had been released 2 years earlier, which might have actually happened, it might have made an impact, but that's not the case. I don't know what they mean by 3DO being online for October. I guess it's just going to be able to be sold. So we have Cyber People in London. So apparently there's some party. Day of the Tentacle had been released, and that was one of the better games at the time. I preferred the original Maniac Mansion, but okay. Oh, look at this. Nintendo Super Machine for 1995. A year off. And this is the workstation. This is actually a Silicon Graphics computer, which would have specs comparable to the Nintendo 64. So people would look at the games made on these computers and be like, that's the future of Nintendo. But no, it wasn't like that actually. Maybe later we'll see some screenshots of what we thought the Nintendo 64 would be like, and they're much better. Or maybe here, like this. This is Jurassic. Yeah, this is Jurassic Park, you know, showing off the capabilities of Silicon Graphics. That was the whole point of the Nintendo 64, to use these 3D graphics without any experience in gaming. So, yeah, Nintendo 64 wasn't that successful because they, you know, how many good 3D games were made for the system? 7 maybe? Okay, so let's continue. We have a digital video on the CDI. Yeah, Laserdisc is not digital, folks. So CDI, you could play movies digitally, but wasn't worth it. DVD was much better. And now this is the future. This is the future of 3D game. You see Ridge Racer at the bottom left, and here's in-game footage. Looks really good. No necessity for Silicon Graphics. So is it Daytona on the right? No, it's still Ridge Racer. So look at that. These are foreboding times. EA, they ditched Nintendo. So yeah, that's the beginning of the end for Nintendo's dominance. The lack of third-party support. Companies doing things on other ones. Now here we have Virtual Fighter. And I think it's Star Wars. Yeah, polygon heavy or polygon light games at the time. It's a demo. You see the fellow with the scarf on his head? He was removed late. I think it was replaced with Akira. So Virtual Fighter, also one of the first 3D games that looked well and played well too. Another version of 3DO. I don't remember seeing that ever in real life. And we have Street Fighter 2 at the bottom left, which we're still getting an update every year. Okay, not much interesting here. Some conferences. And the charts. Well, the Mega CD #1 is Night Trap, of course. No, it's a lot like last month. We have Sailor Moon topping the Super Famicom. Not that much interesting here going on. Jungle Strike #1 for Mega CD. That's probably the best sold game in England at the time. And if not, it would be Striker for the Super Nintendo. Okay, so the preview section. We have Mech Warriors 2. And that's some pretty nifty 3D graphics, right? I don't know if this ever was a good game, but it's a Mech Warrior game, so it probably was too slow for popular demand. Now, Voyeur, that's a CDI game with a lot of subpar movies, and yeah, I don't know. Did anybody really think this would be the future of video gaming? Watching crappy videos and making uninteresting choices? Now this is a good game. Beneath the Steel Sky, which just used, you know, traditional 2D graphics, kind of like Monkey Island. And it's one of the best click and carry adventures ever made. It's about a dystopian future, and the choices you make are pretty cool. And it's interesting to see how the society works. And it's also very funny, even though it's also very gloom. So they spent a lot of time discussing this. And even a making of. Look at those pictures they drew. Dungeon Master 2. More hype for a subpar sequel to the old classic. Chaos Control, the cover game. On-rail shooter. Very pretty CGI graphics, which were pre-rendered. So it was like looking at a pretty fancy science fiction movie, and then you had these sprites, which also had the CGI graphics shadowing. You know, kind of like you know, Donkey Kong had, you know, it looked 3D in Donkey Kong Country, because of the shadow effects, and that's what you also see very heavily in this game. These dark shadows, which totally look out of place because it's obvious the lighting's coming from somewhere else. But it looks pretty good still after all these years. And the PC version, it renders everything in the game and doesn't look as good as the CDI version. Return to Zork. Remember Zork? Well, this is Zork with less gameplay and more MPEG video. And it wasn't very popular. Now, Virtual Racing. Yeah, oh, but this is the Mega Drive version, which is probably the most expensive 16-bit game ever made. Because really, it needed a pretty big chip to render all those polygons. Thunderhawk, the pretty good Sega CD game being advertised. Now, Super Street Fighter 2, which is less good than Street Fighter 2 Turbo because the 4 new characters weren't that much fun, and they slowed down the speed. And I didn't like the new sounds, really. The announcer became whinier. And Sonic Boom went from Sonic Boom to Sonic Boom. So yeah, the game lost some of its punch. But Super Turbo, which was released half a year later, was better. It was faster, better balanced. A lot of fun. Probably still the best fighting game ever made. Mega Man X, Mega Race, Elfmania. I only know Mega Man X. HMV, selling video games. And the release dates. Look at that. I didn't know you can jump in Top Gear 2. Oh, Intel chips. Affordable power source. Yeah. Well, that's a whole discussion. Won't get into that now. CD-ROM, the truth. Now, this article is fascinating because it's extremely negative about CD-ROMs. I love it. Let's just look at the bold parts. When CD-ROM really takes off, expect gameplay to take a nosedive. Well, it wasn't that bad, but yeah, the PlayStation titles have proven to be less good in the long run than the Super Nintendo games, right? And well, 3DO, Sega, Amiga CD32. Yeah, as far as genuine multi-level interaction is concerned, video footage is a dead loss. You're right. We don't use video footage in games anymore unless it's Her Story. CD is dumb and blind and stupid. It does nothing to increase the quality of graphics. Like I said, it's just storage, just a place to get data into the machine. And now that cartridges are getting cheaper, DVD might also go the way of the dinosaur. Yeah, CDI. FM Towns Marty, the Japanese equivalent to a CD32. It has Truxton 2, which we'll see later, review for, so it's not all bad. Yeah, the Turbo Duo, it's called in America. And again, that logo, yeah, it's still 1993, Jurassic Park. Now, some facts about the CD-ROM. And I really like this page. I mean, it looks rather funky, but it shows that there are a lot of different kinds of CDs. That's why you had to have the right machine for the right data transfer. Okay, an ad for all kinds of stuff. Uh-oh. Sex and violence in video games. Yep. Only Edge magazine number 2, and we have to discuss whether or not video games can have adult themes. Of course they can. But not too much in abundance. I mean, if all the video games were only about women who look like this, I would consider that a problem, but it's not the case. At least not anymore. It was kind of the case in the late 90s. And violence, is that a problem? I don't think so. I mean, it's combat, right? Yeah, so not much interesting to say in this article about it, but it's funny how they look at it back then in the early 90s when Doom and Mortal Kombat and Splatterhouse were a concern. And last thing, Dune 2, Battle for Arrakis, an advertisement for that, the game that would start a whole new genre. So, part 2 next time. See you then.